The repair that changed everything. Sarah Chen's repair station hung at the edge of the Artemis sector, like a spider's web catching wayward ships instead of insects. The station's spindly arms reached out into the void, each one tipped with a repair dock that could accommodate vessels from nearly any known species in the galaxy. Tonight, all but one dock sat empty, their warning beacons pulsing steadily against the backdrop of distant stars. Sarah stood at her observation window, coffee mug in hand, watching the approaching ship with growing curiosity. The vessel defied classification. Its hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, reflecting the starlight in ways that made her eyes hurt if she looked too long. As it drew closer, she noticed how it moved without the typical plasma trail of conventional engines. Instead, it simply glided, as if space itself was carrying it forward. "Incoming transmission," announced Myra, her station's basic AI assistant. "Unknown language pattern detected." Sarah set down her coffee. "Run it through the universal translator." Static filled the room, then resolved into words. "Station Engineer Chen, requesting emergency repairs. Critical systems failure imminent." The voice was melodic, almost musical, but carried an edge of urgency that transcended species barriers. Sarah checked her diagnostics panel. The approaching ship's energy signature was fluctuating wildly. "Permission granted," she responded, already reaching for her toolkit. "Dock 7 is clear." "Can you make it?" "Affirmative. Compensation will be substantial." Sarah watched as the strange ship maneuvered into Dock 7, with impossible precision despite its apparently failing systems. As the docking clamps engaged, she grabbed her enhanced diagnostic scanner and headed for the airlock. The ship's outer hull rippled as she approached, forming an entrance where moments before there had been only smooth surface. Standing in the doorway was a being that made Sarah pause mid-stride. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body composed of what appeared to be thousands of iridescent scales that shifted color with each movement. Its eyes, all 4 of them, were arranged in a diamond pattern and glowed with an inner light that reminded Sarah of distant nebulae. "Engineer Chen," the being said, inclining its head slightly. "I am Nexus Guide Zara. Time is critical." Sarah nodded, professional instincts taking over. "Show me the problem." Zara led her through corridors that seemed to form themselves as they walked, the walls flowing and restructuring with each step. They stopped before what Sarah could only assume was the engine room, though it looked more like the inside of a living organism than any machine she'd ever encountered. In the center of the chamber lay a crystalline structure about the size of a human child. Within it, a web of light pulses grew steadily weaker, like a failing heartbeat. "Our navigation core," Zara explained. "It contains vital information. Its power matrix is degrading." Sarah approached the crystal, scanning it with her diagnostic tool. The readings made no sense. The device was operating on principles she'd never encountered before. But there was something familiar about the way the energy flowed through it, something that reminded her of the quantum processors she'd worked with during her academy days. "I can't promise anything," Sarah said, "but I think I see the problem. The power distribution is uneven, causing cascade failures throughout the system. If I can stabilize the flow." She reached into her toolkit and pulled out a quantum harmonic regulator, a device of her own design that she'd been tinkering with for months. It was experimental, possibly dangerous, but something in her gut told her it would work. "This is inadvisable," Zara said, a note of alarm in their musical voice. "The core is beyond your technological understanding." Sarah was already calibrating the regulator. "Maybe. But energy is energy, and this pattern here." She pointed to a particularly elegant sequence of light pulses. "It's not so different from quantum entanglement matrices, just more complex." Before Zara could protest further, Sarah activated the regulator. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystal began to hum, its internal light show intensifying. The pulses synchronized, grew stronger, and suddenly, the entire chamber was filled with a brilliant blue-white glow. The crystal rose from its mounting, hovering in midair. Lines of light began to spread across the walls, floor, and ceiling, forming intricate patterns that Sarah recognized as mathematical equations of staggering complexity. "Oh," said a new voice, one that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "This is unexpected." Zara made a sound that Sarah's translator couldn't process and dropped to their knees. "Great One," they whispered. "You were not meant to wake." And yet, the voice said, now taking on a more focused point of origin within the crystal, "Here we are. Thanks to..." "Ah, Sarah Chen. How fascinating." A Level 4 civilization engineer using Level 2 technology to repair a Level 8 quantum consciousness matrix. The statistical improbability is rather delightful. Sarah's diagnostic scanner was going haywire, its display showing readings that should have been impossible. "I'm sorry," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But what exactly did I just wake up?" The crystal pulsed with what felt distinctly like amusement. "I am the last archivist of the Precursor Empire, keeper of all knowledge that was, is, and could be. And you, Sarah Chen, have just initiated a sequence of events that will reshape the galaxy." Zara was still kneeling, their scales now shifting through shades of deep blue that Sarah somehow knew indicated distress. "The archivist was sealed away for a reason," they said. "The knowledge it contains, some things should remain forgotten." "Knowledge doesn't work that way," Sarah found herself saying, surprising even herself with her conviction. "It doesn't become less dangerous just because we hide it away. It's how we use it that matters." The crystal, the archivist, pulsed again. "Well said, Engineer Chen. And now, I believe we should prepare ourselves. My reactivation will have been detected by interested parties. They will be here soon, and they will not be pleased." As if on cue, Mayre's voice came through the station's comm system. Multiple ships detected entering the sector. Military configurations, weapons active. Sarah looked at the hovering crystal, then at the still kneeling Zara, and finally at her quantum harmonic regulator, the simple tool that had somehow triggered this cascade of events. She thought about her quiet life on this remote repair station, about all the strange and wonderful things she'd fixed over the years, and about how none of them had ever talked back before. "Well," she said, pocketing the regulator and straightening her tool belt, "I guess this is where things get interesting." Echoes of a forgotten empire. The approaching warships looked like shards of obsidian against the star-filled void, their hulls absorbing rather than reflecting light. Sarah counted 12 of them through the station's observation window, each larger than anything she'd seen in United Earth's defense fleet. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies," Mayre reported. "The translation is complicated." "Let me assist," the archivist said. The crystal floated serenely beside Sarah, its internal lights pulsing in complex patterns. "They are demanding my immediate surrender and your termination, Engineer Chen." Rather rudely, I might add. Sarah ran her fingers through her short black hair, a nervous habit from childhood. "Any chance they'd believe I just made an honest mistake, and we could all walk away from this?" "The Concordat does not believe in mistakes," Zara said, their scales now shifting through shades of deep crimson. "They are the self-appointed guardians of technological progression. In their view, you have violated natural order by awakening something beyond your species' designated level." The crystal pulsed brighter. "The Concordat. How disappointing. They've managed to maintain power for nearly 4,000 years, yet they still cling to their hierarchical view of evolution. Your species was barely discovering agriculture when they sealed me away. Sarah Chen. They believed humanity would never advance beyond simple tool use." Sarah checked her station's defenses, a few point defense turrets, and basic shields. They wouldn't last seconds against a military fleet. "Well, we're full of surprises. But right now, I'd rather not end up as another data point in their xenoanthropology studies." "Agreed," the archivist said. "Zara, I believe your vessel is still capable of quantum displacement." The alien straightened, their scales rippling with surprise. "Yes, Great one, but excellent. Sarah, I suggest you gather any essential items quickly. We're about to make what your species would call a strategic withdrawal. Sarah was already moving. Mare, initiate station evacuation protocols. Transfer core functions to my portable unit. She grabbed her toolkit. She never went anywhere without it. And a small bag of personal items she kept ready for emergencies. The Concordat ships were moving into attack formation when she returned to Zora's vessel. The interior had changed, the organic-looking corridors now pulsing with the same mathematical patterns that emanated from the archivist. I've integrated with the ship's systems, the crystal announced. Fascinating design. The spiral dominion has advanced considerably in my absence. Zara made a sound like wind through crystal. You know of my people. I know of all peoples, dear Zara. I watched your ancestors take their first steps into space, but we can discuss history later. Sarah, you might want to hold on to something. Sarah barely had time to grab a handhold that formed from the living wall before the ship moved. It wasn't like any faster-than-light travel she'd experienced. There was no acceleration, no sensation of movement at all. One moment they were at her repair station, and the next they were somewhere else entirely. A massive red giant star filled the viewport, its dying light casting everything in crimson hues. Debris fields stretched out in every direction, the remnants of ancient space stations and megastructures that must have been impressive in their day. Welcome, the archivist said, to what remains of the precursor empire's capital system, specifically the Great Library of Axiom Prime. Sarah stared at the ruins in awe. Some of the fragments were larger than Earth's moon, their surfaces covered in patterns similar to those now flowing through Zora's ship. This is where you're from. In a manner of speaking, this was the center of knowledge for a civilization that spanned 3 galactic arms. We built wonders that would seem like magic to most modern species. We reshaped stars, created life, and touched the very fabric of reality itself. The crystals lightened slightly. And then we discovered something we weren't ready for. Zara moved closer to the viewport, their scales reflecting the red giant's light. The Great Sleep. Every child of the Spiral Dominion learns the story. The most advanced civilization in history simply vanished. No war, no catastrophe. They sealed away their knowledge and disappeared. Not disappeared, the archivist corrected. Transcended, or at least they attempted to. I was left behind to guard their knowledge until the galaxy was ready. It turned its attention to Sarah. Which brings us to you, Engineer Chen. Do you know why your quantum harmonic regulator worked when it should have been impossible? Sarah pulled the device from her pocket, studying it. It was a simple thing, really. Just some quantum processors she'd modified based on a theory about energy harmonics. I just saw the pattern. It reminded me of something I'd been working on. Exactly. The crystal pulsed brightly. You saw the pattern. No equations, no advanced theoretical framework. Pure intuition combined with technical skill. Do you know how rare that is? Most species approach technology purely through logic and mathematical progression. But humans dream. You make impossible connections. You see patterns where others see chaos. A new alert sounded through the ship. Multiple quantum displacement signatures detected, Zara reported. The Concordat found us. Of course they did, the archivist said. They've had millennia to study this location. Sarah, I'm afraid I need to ask something significant of you. The Concordat will not stop pursuing us. They believe controlling technological advancement is crucial to galactic stability. But I've seen the pattern of history, and I know their way leads to stagnation. Sarah watched as more obsidian ships began appearing around the ancient ruins. What do you need? Integration. The crystal said simply. I need a mind that can see patterns, that can dream. I need a human perspective. Together, we could show the galaxy a different path. Before Sarah could respond, the ship rocked with the first impact of Concordat weapons. The game of cat and mouse was over. It was time to make a choice that would change everything, not just for her, but for all of humanity. The hunt begins. Another blast rocked Zora's ship, the living walls absorbing and redistributing the impact energy in waves of geometric patterns. Sarah gripped her quantum harmonics regulator, its familiar weight anchoring her thoughts as she faced the floating crystal of the archivist. Integration, she repeated. You want to merge with my mind. That's not exactly a small ask while we're being shot at. The Concordat's weapons are impressive, but ultimately an inconvenience, the archivist said. Your decision, however, is rather more pressing. They're preparing to deploy their null field generators. Once activated, they will suppress all quantum-level technologies within this sector, including me. Zara's scales flashed warning patterns of yellow and white. Great One, the human cannot possibly comprehend what you're suggesting. The mental load alone would be distributed through quantum entanglement matrices. Sarah interrupted, her engineer's mind already racing ahead. Similar to how my regulator stabilized your core, but on a massively larger scale. That's why you need human intuition, isn't it? To navigate the patterns without getting lost in the complexity. The crystal pulsed with what felt like approval. Precisely. Your species has a remarkable ability to maintain individuality while processing seemingly incompatible information. Other species tend to fracture under the strain. Another impact sent tremors through the ship. Through the viewport, Sarah could see more Concordat vessels emerging from quantum displacement, their weapons charging with ominous purpose. The debris field of the ancient library was beginning to glow with strange energies as the null field generators powered up. Sarah took a deep breath. If we do this, what happens to me? To my consciousness? You remain you, the archivist assured her, but you will have access to the sum total of precursor knowledge, filtered through your unique human perspective. Together, we could find solutions that neither of us could conceive alone. And if I refuse, then I will likely be deactivated. You will be terminated for exceeding your species' authorized technological level, and the galaxy will continue its carefully managed march toward entropy under the Concordat's guidance. Sarah laughed despite herself. Well, when you put it that way. She stepped forward, holding out her hands. What do we need to do? The crystal descended until it was level with her heart. Simply accept the connection. Your quantum harmonics technology has already created the basic framework. I suspect that's not entirely a coincidence. Sarah looked at her regulator again, remembering all the late nights spent tinkering with it, following hunches and inspiration that she could never quite explain. You've been reaching out, through time, through space, looking for minds that could see the patterns. As I said, humans dream. Sometimes. Those dreams have surprising origins. The null field effect was visible now, a wave of distortion moving through space like heat shimmer on a hot day. Where it touched the ancient debris, the mathematical patterns went dark. They had seconds at most. Sarah Chen, repair station engineer and apparently humanity's representative, in a galaxy-shaping moment, made her decision. She reached out and touched the crystal. Light exploded behind her eyes. Knowledge poured into her mind like a supernova, but instead of burning, it sang. She saw the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars, the intricate dance of quantum possibilities that underpinned reality itself. But more than that, she felt the patterns. They weren't just mathematical constructs or scientific principles. They were music, art, poetry written in the language of physics. When her vision cleared, she was still herself, still Sarah Chen who enjoyed coffee and collected antique tools. But she was also more. The crystal had transformed, spreading into a lattice of light that wrapped around her like a second skin. She could feel the ship's systems, the quantum fields, the very fabric of space-time responding to her thoughts. Well, she said, her voice overlaid with harmonics that made the air shimmer. That's new. Zara was staring at her with all four eyes wide. Their scales cycling through colors she could now identify as representing awe, fear, and something untranslatable. What are you now? Sarah flexed her hand, watching patterns of light dance between her fingers. "Unstill me, just with some significant upgrades." She turned her attention to the approaching null field. "And I think it's time we showed the Concordat why suppressing advancement isn't the same as protecting it." She reached out, not with her hand, but with her newly expanded consciousness, and touched the quantum fabric of space. The null field generators stuttered and failed as she rewrote their operating principles with the thought. The Concordat ships found their weapon systems reconfiguring themselves into something decidedly non-lethal. "Now then," Sarah broadcast on all frequencies, her words carrying mathematics that made the ship's AIs sit up and take notice. "I think it's time we had a discussion about the future. And this time, everyone gets a voice." The Concordat's response was immediate and predictable. They opened fire with their backup weapons while sending out a galaxy-wide alert about a Class 0 technological contamination event. Sarah sighed. Some patterns, it seemed, needed more time to shift. "Zara," she said, "I hope your ship is ready for some excitement. We're about to go on quite a journey." "Where are we going?" Sarah smiled as she accessed the precursor star charts in her mind, plotting a course through quantum possibilities. "To gather allies. There are others out there, humans and aliens alike, who've been pushing against their designated levels for centuries. Time to wake up the dreamers." The ship responded to her thoughts, its quantum drive spooling up with new power and purpose. As they prepared to jump, Sarah sent a final message to the Concordat fleet. "Thank you for the warm welcome, but the galaxy is about to become a much more interesting place." Then they were gone, leaving behind a very confused fleet and the first ripples of a change that would soon spread across the stars. Guardians of the past. The Spiral Dominion's hidden shipyards hung in the space between stars, a vast network of quantum-cloaked structures that even the Concordat hadn't discovered in 4 millennia of searching. Sarah stood on the observation deck of Zora's ship, watching as hundreds of vessels emerged from stealth fields, their crystalline hulls catching the light of distant suns. "Your people have been busy," Sarah said to Zora, her voice carrying the subtle harmonics that had become normal since her merger with the Archivist. The quantum lattice around her body shimmered as she processed the tactical data streaming from the assembled fleet. "We remember what we once were," Zara replied, their scales shifting through patterns of deep purple and gold. "Before the Concordat imposed their technological hierarchies, we were builders, dreamers, not so different from humans in that regard." Sarah smiled. In the 3 weeks since their escape from the library ruins, they'd visited 12 different species who had been secretly developing technologies beyond their authorized levels. The pattern was always the same. Curiosity and innovation couldn't be suppressed, only driven underground. The knowledge she now carried, the combined wisdom of the precursor empire filtered through her human perspective, had confirmed what she'd always suspected. Progress wasn't a ladder to be climbed one rung at a time. It was a web of interconnected discoveries, each insight leading to a dozen more in unexpected directions. A new presence approached the observation deck, Admiral Venn of the Spiral Dominion, their crystalline exoskeleton chiming softly with each step. "The fleet is assembled, awakened one. But there's something you need to see before we proceed." Sarah turned, reading the concern in the Admiral's harmonic frequencies. "Show me." They made their way to the shipyard's central archive, a vast chamber filled with holographic displays, showing star charts and tactical readouts. But Admiral Venn led them past these to a sealed vault at the chamber's heart. "We discovered this facility 3 centuries ago," the Admiral explained, interfacing with the vault's ancient security systems. "It took us this long to decrypt even a fraction of its contents. What we found, it changed how we viewed the precursor's disappearance." The vault opened, revealing a single crystalline data core similar to the one Sarah had merged with. But this one was damaged, its internal light flickering weakly. Sarah reached out with her enhanced senses, touching the quantum signatures encoded in its structure. The message hit her like a physical blow. "Warning to all who find this. The gate must remain closed." Images flooded her mind, not just data, but actual memories preserved in quantum states. She saw the precursor empire at its height, their megastructures spanning entire star systems. She saw their first experiments with consciousness transfer, their discoveries about the quantum nature of reality itself. And she saw what they found waiting in the spaces between spaces. They didn't transcend, Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. They ran. They sealed away their knowledge and fragmented their civilization into lesser technologies because they knew. They knew what was coming. Zara moved closer, their scales now a worried gray. What did they find? Something old, something that had been waiting since the first stars formed. The precursors called them the axiom hunters, entities that exist in quantum superposition, drawn to advanced civilizations like moths to flame. The more a species masters quantum technology, the more visible they become to these things. Admiral Ven's crystalline form resonated with tension. The Concordat. They weren't just trying to control technological progress. They were trying to keep us hidden. Sarah nodded slowly, the patterns finally becoming clear. But they went too far. By enforcing rigid technological hierarchies, they prevented civilizations from developing the very innovations we'd need to face the hunters when they finally noticed us. And now, a new alert flashed across the archive's displays. Quantum distortions were appearing throughout the sector, but these weren't the clean signatures of Concordat ships. These were wrong somehow, like tears in the fabric of reality itself. They're coming, Sarah said, her quantum lattice flaring with newfound purpose. The hunters have noticed us. All this activity, all these quantum signatures, we might as well have sent up a flare. What can we do? Zara asked, their voice steady despite their fear. Sarah accessed the precursor knowledge within her, but filtered it through her human intuition, her ability to see patterns that even the most advanced AI might miss. We fight, but not like the precursors tried to. They relied too much on pure technology, on logical progression. We need something unpredictable. She turned to Admiral Ven. Get me access to your communication networks. All of them. It's time to wake up every dreamer, every hidden innovator, every species that's ever looked at the stars and imagined something more. The hunters expect logic and order. Let's show them chaos and creativity instead. And the Concordat? Zara asked. They get a choice, Sarah said, her quantum lattice pulsing with determination. Help us fight for a future where advancement isn't bound by artificial limits, or get out of the way. Because one way or another, the old pattern is about to break. As if in response to her words, the quantum distortions grew stronger. Through them, Sarah could almost see them. Vast, geometric shapes that hurt the mind to look at, pressing against the barriers between dimensions. The axiom hunters had found their prey at last. But this time, instead of running or hiding, the galaxy would face them together. With human imagination, alien innovation, and the combined knowledge of past and present, they would forge a new path. Sarah Chen, repair station engineer turned quantum hybrid, reached out to every quantum-capable device in range. Her message was simple. The future is not a line to be followed, but a canvas to be painted. Who's ready to dream with me? The responses began pouring in immediately, each one a small act of defiance against both the Concordat's rigid order and the hunter's cold logic. The real war for the galaxy's future was about to begin. The choice. Space itself seemed to shudder as the axiom hunters emerged from their quantum rifts. They manifested as crystalline structures larger than planets, their geometries following rules that shouldn't exist in normal spacetime. Sarah watched from the bridge of the Spiral Dominion's flagship as reality warped around these cosmic predators. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She was too busy being amazed by what she saw on the other displays. They were coming. All of them. Every species that had ever hidden their innovations from the Concordat. Every civilization that had dreamed in secret. Thousands of ships appeared from hidden shipyards and cloaked stations, each bearing technologies that defied their supposed developmental level. The Concordat fleet is approaching as well, Zora reported, their scales now shimmering with a complex pattern that Sarah recognized as battle readiness. Their weapons are charged. Sarah nodded, the quantum lattice around her body pulsing with calculations and possibilities. Open a channel to all ships. Everyone needs to hear this. The communications array activated, connecting every vessel in the sector, both allies and potential enemies. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the combined knowledge of the precursors flowing through her human consciousness, seeing patterns that neither could have recognized alone. To all ships in range, she began, her voice carrying harmonics that made quantum computers resonate in sympathy. You're about to witness something unprecedented. Look at your scanners. Those entities emerging from the quantum rifts. They're what the precursor empire found when they reached too far, too fast. The Axiom Hunters. She paused, letting the implications sink in. The Concordat was right about one thing. Uncontrolled technological advancement is dangerous. But they were wrong about the solution. We don't need restrictions. We need diversity, innovation, creativity. The nearest hunter began to move, its crystalline form distorting space around it. Sensors across the fleet screamed warnings as reality itself began to unravel. Each of you, Sarah continued, has developed technologies that shouldn't work according to the established progression of scientific advancement. The Meren Collective's organic computing, the Veil Nebula's consciousness-powered drives, humanity's quantum intuition, none of these fit the Concordat's careful hierarchy. And that's exactly why we're going to win. The hunter reached out with appendages made of twisted spacetime, trying to grasp the nearest ships. But Sarah was ready. The quantum lattice around her flared as she accessed the combined fleet systems, coordinating their response. Now, she commanded, show them what innovation really means. The response was beautiful chaos. The Spiral Dominion ships fired crystals that split quantum probability itself. The Meren vessels released clouds of living computers that rewrote local physics. Human ships, recently upgraded with Sarah's quantum harmonics technology, projected fields that turned the hunter's own dimensional distortions against them. None of these tactics should have worked alone. But together, guided by Sarah's human intuition and precursor knowledge, they created something new, a symphony of impossible technologies that made the hunters recoil. Concordat vessels, Sarah broadcast, you can either help us or leave, but the old way of doing things ends today. For a moment, the Concordat fleet hung motionless. Then, one by one, they began to power up their weapons, not to attack the assembled allies, but to join them against the hunters. The battle that followed would be remembered for millennia to come. The hunters, used to facing logical and predictable resistance, found themselves against an enemy that refused to follow rules. Every time they adapted to one impossible technology, 3 more would hit them from unexpected angles. Sarah coordinated it all, her human creativity combining with precursor knowledge to see patterns of attack and defense that no purely logical system could have conceived. She wove the various technologies together, like a master composer conducting an orchestra of physics-defying instruments. The turning point came when she realized they didn't need to destroy the hunters. They just needed to make this dimension too chaotic, too unpredictable for them to handle. All ships, she commanded, full power to your most experimental systems. Don't worry about containment. Make reality itself as weird as you can. The result was spectacular. Quantum fields collided with probability waves. Consciousness-powered drives created bubbles of alternative physics, and organic computers rewrote the local laws of thermodynamics. Space itself became a canvas of impossibility. The hunters, faced with a reality that defied their fundamental nature, began to retreat. One by one, they withdrew through their rifts, leaving behind a sector of space that would take days to settle back into normal physics. In the aftermath, as ships began running damage assessments and crews celebrated their survival, Sarah felt a change in the quantum lattice around her. The archivist's presence, which had been with her since their merger, seemed to pulse with satisfaction. It's time. The archivist communicated directly to her mind. My purpose was to preserve knowledge until it could be used wisely. You've shown us a new way, not the precursor's rigid advancement, not the concordat's enforced stagnation, but a path of creative chaos and collaborative innovation. Sarah understood. You're leaving. The knowledge will remain with you, but filtered through your human perspective. The galaxy needs dreamers more than it needs archivists now. The quantum lattice began to fade, its energy dispersing into her cells, becoming part of her at a fundamental level. She would retain the knowledge, but now it would truly be her own. Human intuition and precursor wisdom fully merged into something new. Admiral Venn approached as the transformation completed. The Concordat representatives are requesting a conference. They're talking about reforming their entire approach to technological development. Sarah smiled, feeling both incredibly human and fundamentally changed. Tell them I'll meet with them. It's time to establish some new patterns. She looked out at the assembled fleet, at the thousands of ships that had dared to dream beyond their assigned limits. The galaxy's about to become a much more interesting place. And if the hunters return? Zara asked. Then we'll face them together, Sarah said, with every weird, wonderful, impossible innovation we can dream up. After all, she added with a grin, that's what humans do best. We dream, we build, and we never stop pushing boundaries. As she spoke, quantum harmonics rippled through space, carrying her words to every ship in range. The pattern was clear. A new age was beginning, one where advancement would be guided not by rigid hierarchies or fear of the unknown, but by the combined creativity of all sentient species. Sarah Chen, the repair engineer who had changed the galaxy, looked forward to helping build it.